ready. Shall we call this meeting to order, please? Everybody can assume the position. Okay. I guess I should say welcome to the April 4th River City Arcs Club meeting. Members and guests. I guess the first thing on the agenda would be just to say that we have continued our reservation for this room, but when we made the reservation, I realized that July 4th was our next, our July meeting. Oh no, so I made it the 5th. So I hope everybody's happy with coming the next day. Otherwise, is JoJo going to be available? If you want to do the reports, I believe you do, you can do JoJo's, and I have a hard copy here if you want.
Okay, I need to borrow the microphone.
Okay.
Okay, hi. This is Carol, KP4MD, and I'm going to be doing this for JoJo since he isn't able to join us today. The Treasury and membership report. We have a total of 119 paid members as of March 28th, 2023. And you can check the listing on n6na.org to verify if your call sign is there to know that you're up to date. If not, we I encourage you to go ahead and catch up on your dues for 2023. We have adopted a new membership management platform called Ham Club Online that has not gone live yet, but it will be very soon. And actually, JoJo is the person who will give you a little bit more information about that, but it's...
I write up about it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, it's down here. What the changes are. That's right. Your membership payment will now cycle through a period of 365 days, and the date you pay will be the anniversary date of renewal. Most members of the club have membership start dates set to the beginning of the calendar year. After 2023, we appreciate your timely renewals, and we offer self-service renewals now via Ham Club Online. If you don't use a computer or PayPal, no sweat, we still accept all modes and forms of payment. Ham Club Online is encouraged but not mandatory. Many club members still write checks and put a stamp on the envelope. With Ham Club Online, you get to see your fellow club members' information as you would find in the FCC license database, or QRZ. It's up to you how little or how much personal information you want loaded into Ham Clubs Online. And with Ham Clubs Online, you can get real-time updates with your FCC license information. You can change your address, email, and phone number and receive timely membership renewal reminders. So yeah, I can't answer any questions about that, but when JoJo is here at the next meeting, he certainly would be able to talk a little bit more about that. And of course, you could always send questions by email to contact@n6na.org. Again, we want to give thanks to our evergreen donors who are David, KM6GYM, Lawrence, KC6TRH, and Sylvia, KS6WTF. And as a snapshot of our bank account, we have in our checking account, $9,853.31 available. And pending debit is a club trailer insurance. There was a check sent out for $26.60. Thank you, and 73 respectfully presented by JoJo KN6HTD. Okay, we're going to do the web report also here, and here we go. Very good. Just a, let's see, here we go. This is the web report. We report the web activity for the previous month, which was the month of March 2023. And again, just a reminder, our website is n6na.org, where we keep up-to-date information about club events. There's a calendar on there on the home page. There's also pages that explain all about our nets and our DIY radio builders group and all the activities that River City Arcs does. So be sure and check on there regularly to get updated. Again, thanks to our web design team, who helps keep it updated. A reminder about our nets: Wednesday nights, 8 p.m. is our 2-meter net on the 145.25 megahertz repeater, which is also accessible through Echolink and All-Star. At 8:30 p.m. on Wednesdays, we have our 10-meter net on 28.420 megahertz upper sideband. And 9 p.m., we have our slow scan television net at 441.30 megahertz repeater, and it also streams live on our YouTube channel. Saturday is the 40-meter net. Yes, our roundtable net, Saturdays at 3 p.m. Pacific time on 7181 kilohertz lower sideband, and that's a lot of fun. This is a very casual, informal net just for chit-chatting and checking in, saying hello, and maybe any questions you have out there. It's very relaxed, and it's been very popular. Thank you. The website activity for March. We had a total of 1,095 page views during March, with the peak web page views were on March 8th, a total of 98. The most visited web pages, homepage had 437 views. The magnetic loop antenna project page, 102 views. That was a project we did about 12 years ago. It was very popular, and we still get a lot of views from all over the world on how to build your own magnetic loop antenna. It's pretty interesting. The All-Star Echolink page had 62 views. Our Nets page, 43 views, and the repeater page had 33 views. And views by source, we had 49.4% of the views were referred by Google, and 31.1% were direct hits to our n6na.org URL. Most of the views, again, come from California, 777 during March, 32 from Washington, 23 from England, and the rest were from other countries all around the world. And just a reminder, we have our social media feeds. Our YouTube channel now has 402 subscribers, and we've had 591 views during the month of March. And we have 683 followers on our Facebook page. Our Twitter page has 150 followers, and we have a Discord chat with a total of 32 members. Reminder, send your emails if you have any questions to contact@n6na.org, and we direct the email to the appropriate person, and it's for you to get an answer back. And that's about it. Thank you very much, and we'll turn it back to our president. Our stand-in for president.
Okay. Since we're all gathered here together, we might as well introduce ourselves to everyone and the same. So if we could start with you.
I'm Hank. Woo. K6HUH.
I'm Ken, KE6RMN.
Dave, WB6YLK. We have some guests here, Fred. Anybody that we missed?
Matthew, W6KDJ.
Okay. And I am Gert, Kilo 6, Zulu Golf Alpha, and our illustrious.
I'm Carol, KP4MG.
I'm James, AE6JG.
I'm Jen, Kilo India 1 Tango Tango Yankee, or Ms. Kitty.
Yes. And since you have the mic, How about we turn you loose on your presentation?
Oh
And
no,
she
it's
is our
time.
illustrious speaker.
Oh, wait a minute.
Ah,
We have
yes, there
Zoom
are-
people.
They were behind me. Shall we then? Starting at the top. Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve, Kilo November 6, Victor.
1 second. Audio? We're not getting the Zoom audio. Yes, 1 minute. Steve?
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing. Try somebody else.
We hear you, Steven.
Okay, all right.
Cultural war and has warned its citizens to stay away from all things South Korea, including fashion, hairstyles, music, and even slang from the country. In the past 10 years, South Korea has emerged as a formidable
Friends of
cultural
yours?
force, and their products such as makeup, skincare, K-pop, K-drama, and more have won the hearts of fans around the world. However, North Korea is hell-bent on stopping South Korean influence from permeating its standards. In the past, North Korea has publicly executed at least 7 people for watching or distributing K-pop videos from South Korea. The North Korean ruler, Kim Jong-un, has called K-pop vicious cancer. He does not try to hide his distaste for the music culture of his neighboring and longtime enemy state. Since taking power, Kim Jong-un has attacked all forms of South Korean entertainment. According to him, it corrupts the minds of North Koreans. Under the lockdown of 2020, those who distribute South Korean.
Very, very soft.
Mike, can you hear me?
Now we can. Good job.
Hey,
Go.
Mike, you gotta unmute yourself or they won't be able to hear you. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Steve, KN6 Victor Delta Papa, and I was stationed in South Korea, so I know all about that stuff.
Okay. Francis?
Francis, KF6BOZ, Kilo Foxtrot 6, Victor Oscar Zulu, Quebec.
Kayla?
Kilo Alpha 6, Yankee Lima Alpha, Kayla in Carmichael.
Okay. Mike?
Hi, KN6, Yankee Charlie November. I'm in Elk Grove.
Okay. Okay. Dave?
I assume David.
David?
This is, yeah. David, Kilo Echo 7, Echo Lima, Citrus Heights.
Okay. And I think the top row is locals. And there's Daryl.
This is Daryl, KM6 KFW from Woodland.
Okay. Welcome. Welcome all. Okay. Now we can turn it loose.
Do I need to reshare? Do I need to reshare? Yeah. Yep.
Steve, can you see that? Steve on Zoom?
Can the Zoom people see my first slide? Okay.
Nicaragua 23.
Say that again?
Nicaragua 2023.
Yes, you're good. All right, I'm going to see if this will work over on this side. And thanks so much for letting me come talk to you today. Nicaragua 2023, making connections or not making connections. Let's see if this is going to work. Oh my God, yeah. Here we go again. Is it going to just roll? Rolling. I think I'm going to be doing it from this side and maybe have James roll me down. So a little bit about me. My name's Jennifer Garland. I have nicknames Kitty, JG, Jen, Scone Fairy. That's because I do a lot of baking. And I have a lot of hobbies. I did not retire with an absence of things to do. So I do a little bit of everything, and I enjoy everything. I currently volunteer for the Sacramento Master Gardeners. And my first experience with radio was a CB in the 70s in my exploding blue Pinto. And then after that kind of went away, both the Pinto and my CB, and moved to Sacramento, I didn't touch ham again until about 2020, 2021, when I was studying for my first technical exam. I went to Sac State here, came up in '82, and I just didn't leave. I liked Sacramento that much. And then last year, I did my general and my amateur extra back to back, and I also got my GMRS. Excellent. Perfect. Back. I know it's a really touchy one. Okay, so I want to thank people because it's really important that today I'm able to make connections. In fact, 2 days ago, I was able to hear a gentleman in South Africa, which for me is just great, and being able to hear and talk to people in the Marshall Islands. And JoJo started me out here in this club. I decided, I needed to do something to figure out how I was going to get on the air. It's much different than CB radio and just clicking a few buttons and turning a few channels. So the mentor program and JoJo got me started, along with Wilson, James, Carol, and my friend Greg from Reading. Next slide. So I'm going to give you a little overview. I'm going to blow through a bunch of slides, and then I'm going to tell you the problems with and the successes of connecting in Nicaragua. So the trip was mid-February, and this was a mission trip with the Presbyterian Church called Eventide. It's off of El Camino, not too far off of El Camino, over by the whole paycheck. And they have done mission trips down to Nicaragua for the last 7 years, and the pastor's been going to and doing mission trips to Nicaragua since the 80s. And this in particular, they had been supporting this village in Nicaragua, and it was they weren't able to do their trips in the COVID time, obviously, for travel. And this was a catch up from the last time they went. And so there were a few more people that went on the trip, including me. And I was asked to go because I have some IT skills. And what we were going back down to do was check on their progress to see how they had done, and also to deliver some funds for new latrines, which for me was a real critical thing. I think sanitation and having the privacy and clean water and the ability to have clean water and food supply and food security is really important. That was more important to me than the computers. It was obviously, we all know what it's like to go camping, I'm sure, and we all know how important it is to have sanitation, clean water, good food, and to be able to have a safe and secure home. And that's some of the things that these villages in Nicaragua are striving for. And so we were delivering money, food, school supplies, sporting goods, and also computers. And then we had some chores while we were at the school in Sapot. Next slide. So on this trip, we were there for 8 days, and we had a pretty quick schedule of going to the different areas. And we started out with going from Managua, flew in there, to a coastal town on the Pacific side, and getting the lay of the land, what we had to organize to go to the village for 3 days and 2 nights, because we were going to be, it was a little bit more primitive and a little more like camping when we got there. And so that was our staging zone. And then we went on to the village, and then from the village, next slide, we went to Leon, which is the second largest city in Nicaragua. And there we worked with the school in doing the computers, dropping off computers, getting the old ones reconfigured, and a little more work, and then painting the auditorium. And lastly, we actually had a wedding to go to, which was the pastor's goddaughter. So I want to talk about SAPOD really briefly because they've done some amazing work. They started in the early 70s as by a doctor in order to respond to a massive earthquake down there. And so they were the support system for people trying to recover from that earthquake. And that rolled into other emergencies and disasters, into some political strife and being able to assist with balancing the sides somewhat, and helping with brokering deals between the two sides. And then finally, it morphed into what it is today, which is a support system for economically challenged villages in Nicaragua. And so the game plan for SAPOD, and it's the Church of, down there they actually said the Council of Ecumenical or Evangelical Presbyterian Churches, or Council of Protestant Churches. There's a number of different ways, but it's been translated. They have a program for they don't approach a village, first of all. The villages approach them. They're the ones that come to SAPOD and say, we need help. And then SAPOD says, okay, do you meet some basic criteria? And if you meet that basic criteria, we're going to match you with a church. You're going to sign a 5-year contract. We're going to help you with these programs of leadership development, women's economic development, food security, and mental health. And each village has a group of people that lead these particular programs within their village. And it's the same program for every village. You do the same thing across the board. And so I saw that success there with the village that we visited and a couple additional villages that were not a part of our program. It was amazing to see how motivated these people were to have food security, have the ability to sell the things that they grow or make. That was just amazing and a huge thing. And I think SAPOD should be really proud of the program that they have developed. Next slide. So, in case you missed where, one back. Oh, well. Oh, then, yeah. This is just, the next slide is just discussing the basics of what it takes to become a part of the SAPOD program and then be matched with the church, which was the program that for the village that we were visiting. So in case people forgot where Nicaragua is, Central America, squished between Honduras and Costa Rica with a little edge of El Salvador in this bay. It's got 2 inland lakes, and we were north of Managua and south of Esteli. Next slide. So topography, for the ones that are thinking about how well my radio wave's going to go. The Atlantic side, very tropical, wet, lowlands, and the very west side, Pacific side, lowlands, and then in the center, also slightly tropical, but actually more, it's called tropical arid, up into the mountains, and the mountains, the top peak is about 4,200 feet. Next slide. So red should tell you what the temperature range is here. Year round, your ranges are mostly between 70 and 90 degrees, but the humidity is really the killer. And Managua's in actually a more drier zone where they get about 47 inches a year. Next slide. I've been to Belize and I've been to Ghana from 76 and 2005, and I thought I was going to die. I don't go and do heat. I don't do humidity. That's just not my thing. But, you know, our genetics are Northern California, cooler climates, temperate. So I thought I was gonna melt. But I did quite fine. Actually, the humidity wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, and it was actually quite pleasant. So always check your state national website, or State Department's website about going to travel, because the first thing I learned after I said yes was travel level 3 in Nicaragua, which means we advise you not to go. I'm like, oh great, you know, I've already said yes, and now I put my money down, and now what does this really mean? Next slide. And it means that they have crime, health, detention, and other issues when you go down there. This kind of actually led into my issues with ham and being able to bring equipment down. Next slide. So Ortega, who was the president elected, decided that he wanted to be more permanent, similar to some other folks in the world today. And so he threw out his constitution that they all worked on and became the dictator with his wife as vice president. And he decided that in January, they did not want people to come into the country with drones, radio equipment, binoculars, and cameras, which is mighty inconvenient because I'm going down there. I want to, one, I want to be able to use my ham gear if it's possible, and two, I bird. I love birding, and I want to be able to use my binoculars, and I love photography, and I want to be able to take pictures, mainly of the birds that I was looking for. So that was January, mid-January. Next slide. And so 2 weeks later, people had already, there's actually tourism there. That's a big thing for Nicaragua. And they decided, okay, we're going to rescind that. And so we got the notice that had been rescinded. And then we talked to some of the people in country, and the in-country people said, still don't bring binoculars. And of course, the electronic equipment wasn't a good idea either. So I did bring a camera, but it was my oldest camera that if it was confiscated and I didn't get it back, I wasn't going to cry too much. Next slide. So we flew into Managua, and note to self on things. This is just a little list of things on what issues when you come through the country. First of all, when we got to the airport and we're going through customs, some of our folks never got checked. Some of us, like me, got checked because we had things that looked like cigarettes or contraband. And then we had one couple, two of our friendly travelers, they had put their stuff on the scales at the same time at the San Francisco airport, and one got tagged. One person's luggage got tagged with the other person's name. And so that got you to a little room in the back with the people with the guns. And that all got sorted out, fortunately. And the one thing that I noticed behind the customs desk as I was waiting for them to review my stuff, and they didn't speak English and my Spanish is kind of woeful, the sign behind the desk was, circle, line through it, and walkie-talkies, handy-talkies, whatever you want to say. There was a big no-no on that. I was like, well, I'm glad I didn't bring my Baofeng with me. And also there for the Master Gardener crowd, friends of mine, they also had a big warning at the top about fusarium wilt. And they were having a problem with fusarium wilt in their bananas. And so they had ag stations, people with guns, with a couple of cones in the roadways, stopping people going between different zones and regions to prevent them from bringing and crossing over with bananas and plantains to prevent the spread of fusarium wilt. Next slide, please. This one before, yeah. Okay, this is what we traveled with through the whole week, was this van and Jorge, our driver, and he was an extremely good driver. And like other Central American, South American countries, other South American countries and Mexico that I've been to, this driving was equally scary as Lima and Mexico City. But he was great. Next slide, please. This was some of our in-country people. Cairo's on the right in the green shirt. He was amazing. He was our interpreter for the whole trip. And this was us having our first meal there while we were waiting to pick up a couple other people at the airport. Next slide, please. So more country issues. And again, this kind of still leads to all into the ham radio stuff when you get a flavor of what the country's like. So when Ortega and his wife decided to take over more than they did before, they scattered Managua with these trees that light up at night. And it cost them a lot of money, as you can see on the screen. And it wasn't favored by the people in Managua and across the country because it's a poor country and you're spending money on these trees that sit there and light up at night. And electricity costs a lot of money. And so it was just a show. And like everything, it ages and not well. Next slide. So we left Managua, we went to Katrina, and Katrina is just a beautiful spot. It's a little town. It's a little town on our way to San Juan de Sur on the coast. And this is a caldera and volcano that's active in the background. And in Nicaragua, there's over 40 volcanoes, 6 of them that are actually active right now. And it's pretty close to populations. And, you know, for me, it was a little worrisome. I'm like, next slide. And this town was just a beautiful little town with, I won't play the music, but people playing music. They had fresh cashews in little envelopes, cups that you could get, and other little tchotchkes. Next slide, please. One more. This is Crater Lake without the island. It was absolutely gorgeous, and it was a beautiful day to be here to see this. Next slide, please. And this was, you just see a little smoke coming out of the top of that volcano. It's just a hint of what was going on in the background in the country. Next slide, please. This was through and on the way out of the town. You actually had to pay a little buck or two to actually come into the town, which I thought was interesting. And after cruising through this, we continued on our way to our first stop. Next slide, please. So all over the country, polys and moxie polys. This is where we got our water. We always had filtered water throughout the trip. And it was really important, A, because it was hot, and B, because you did not want to drink the water out of the faucet. This is owned by Walmart. Somebody was wearing, I know, Walmart's everywhere. Somebody was wearing a badge and it said Walmart, and we're like, what? And looked it up online, and Poly and Moxie Poly throughout Nicaragua owned by Walmart. Next slide, please. San Juan del Sur, a beautiful spot. This is what it's like to go and do, a full day here, do a red eye, and then travel all day, and you've been up for more than 24 hours. It's crash time. Kitty crashed. This is a kitty crash. Next slide, please. This was our first place. That's okay. This was our first place, and it actually was a really nice place to stay at. But like most, I actually have to say, everywhere I've traveled in foreign countries, there's always a little issue with plumbing, and this was no exception. And you just have to remember that to be gentle with the plumbing. But it was a beautiful spot to stay in. Next slide. Next slides are just a couple slides, and this is really actually kind of really off the charts nice for Nicaragua. Even a swimming pool, which was really nice after the end of the day. Next slide, please. So I continue to give you a little tour. Up on the hill, there was the statue of Jesus that looks over this bay, and our hotel rooms down below in the bay. And this, next slide, please. This was put in place after a guy that was dying of cancer, imminent death, said, God, if you save me, I'll put a statue up on the hill. Well, guy's alive today, and here's his statue. Next slide. And it's visited by everybody. This is the bay, and we're actually right in the kind of center left of this bay. It's very, what I would consider resorty, and then what I didn't know before going down to Nicaragua is it's becoming a very touristy place for surfing. Next slide, please. And from our restaurant, which is a block off from our hotel, we could see the statue lit up at night. Next slide, please. And this is kind of this was our restaurant on the bay, and standard fare for everything was salad, rice, beans, and some other items depending on what you chose. And what I found interesting is there was not a lot of seasoning. I haven't found out why, but seasoning was not a thing there. I mean, I don't even think I remember seeing any salt and pepper. And something that I'm sure I'll look up later, because it's an oddity that just fascinates me, because I have like 50 different spices in my cupboard. Next slide, please. So in Nicaragua, they've got some really nice beaches. And now they're being privatized. So this beach that we went to was owned by the mayor of San Juan del Sur. And so whether you're local or you're a a visitor, you pay the same amount to go to this beach. And then it's got actually cabana service. So there's actually a restaurant here that feeds you on the beach. Next slide, please. So I was sticking with the peeled fruit, and one thing you have to know is it's pretty windy on the beach. So sand was constantly flowing through everything that we were having, but it was a delight to have a real Coca-Cola there. Next slide, please. This is a termite nest, and it was probably about 15, 20 feet up in the tree. I saw some as much as like 4 feet tall in the trees. And the termite nests actually have a symbiotic relationship with the orange-chinned parakeets. They actually nest in the termite mounds, well, termite nests, because they're up in the trees, they're not mounds. And not at the same time where everything's active in the termite nest, but in a sense they support each other, but they do not interrupt each other's lifestyles, which was really cool. Next slide. Yeah, if you feel like, if you've got a question, go ahead and ask. This is what it looks like, a chunk of it on the ground, and it was very, very hard mud. Next slide, please. That evening, before we left to go to the village, we had song and dance, next slide, from the locals, which was really quite nice. Mariachis, next slide, please, that played for us. And next slide. Next slide. There's actually music, but I'll just blow through these a little bit. So that was on the road. Now we're on our way to the village. Now we're heading out. I have not tried any radio communications at this point because we were quite busy and late at night, and I had a roommate, and I didn't want to start playing with my laptop and phone with everybody else there. So on our road to getting there, we were actually Jorge and Marjorie, they were our guides, and they were able to discuss some of the politics with us. We didn't feel free to discuss politics with anybody because politics there is very, very tenuous. In fact, one of our SAPOD representatives, her daughter, is in the United States because in the fall, the government had decided to change, I think it was retirement, and the students protested. And you saw on the news, I'm sure, that we got 222 Nicaraguans that were basically excommunicated from, then their passports removed and kicked out of Nicaragua because they were students protesting the changes in the government. Her daughter was one of them, and is now in the United States. She had to flee. She didn't go to jail like the other 222. She was able to escape before that happened, but she cannot go back, at least at this time. So politics, you just didn't talk about anything except for you could ask these two people questions, Jorge and Marjorie. We were able to stop at this cigar factory, and these two were working on 10,000 cigars for a place in Texas. And my neighbor, who is an expert in cigars and smoking them, had never seen these cigars before, and I actually brought him back some because he was taking care of my cat for the whole time I was gone, so he needed a reward. And these are some of the plates and how they shaped some of them. This was actually a very special cigar, and they don't make very many of these. Next one. So if you've ever been through countryside, this was what it looked like there, but here we have exactly the same thing. I felt like I was on my way to Idaho. I always call these Weetabixes or shredded wheats, but it just made me think of Jordan Valley as I'm going through Jordan Valley, a couple times a year. Next slide, please. But it was dry. We're in that time that's dry. So now, yeah, go ahead.
Chocolate factory. I want to see the chocolate factory.
Oh my God, the chocolate factory. It was Disneyland. We had this gentleman, that was, he was 100% Broadway Disneyland. I did bring back some chocolate. In fact, those peanut butter chocolate chips back there, they have some Nicaraguan chocolate on the top of them, just in case you didn't, I added a little extra something for them. The chocolate factory didn't do just chocolate either. They did white chocolate, which I thought was kind of strange. I happen to like it, but most people don't. They did chocolate, they did cocoa, roasted cocoa beans, and they also did a special tea that was something that was a part of some of the indigenous people prior to the Spanish coming. And it was actually a really nice tea. It was cocoa and something else. And then they had something really boozy with gin and something else, not gin, ginger, and a few other things. Of course, I brought that home too. So we had our cigars and we had our chocolate and we moved on to the village, where at no time in any of the villages did I ever see any alcohol. There's just none. And I would presume that was because of expense. But Florida Cana is the main rum producer in the country, and their 18-year-old rum is quite tasty, which I brought some of that home. But they have it like Total Wine. This was the village's, I would say the head of the village, not quite correct, but the head of the village is his house. Most of the houses there were cinder block and coated, or they had some kind of a metal roof. This was actually upscaled a bit. Running water, no, but he did have up on the upper left a tank and some drip system that went down with the plants that are around his house, and he had gravity flow from that tank. And they also did have one cistern, and in that back left corner there, that's one of the latrines, and not one of the new latrines. And everything around these places is super, super basic. Next slide, please. We stayed, 8 of us stayed in this seed house right here. And it's basically a brick building with a floor, brick floor. And we just had mats, and it was warm, so we really didn't need anything other than a mat to sleep with and a sheet. And around the back was the ever breezy latrine. So for me, I really wanted these people to get better sanitation, and the latrine there was a sheet across the latrine, and again, the winds were there, so you could never keep that sheet in place while you're trying to have a little privacy out in this latrine. Across the way was the head of the village's house, and up the street, one of the villagers had a rock formation on their property, on their lot, that was good enough for road base. And so about 50 loads a day in very large trucks were being moved from road base down the road, which actually made him quite well off for the amount of money he was getting for this road base. The company wanted to buy the property. He said no, but he got a stipend for every load of road base that went. And the road base was for 15 kilometers of road, about 2 miles down. And they bricked their roads. It's almost like a concrete brick, but it's not. Sort of like a volcanic mixture with some kind of cementing material. But these cross-like bricks, all the roads near this were brick, which I've never seen before. I don't know about you. I mean, this is just brick. And thousands of bricks stacked up lining the road. After they wrote the road base down, then they put these bricks down, interlocking bricks. Miles of interlocking bricks. And their philosophy behind that was it was easier to replace a couple of bricks than was to, like, have you been down Marconi like today? Okay, there's some really good potholes on Marconi. I was quite surprised. Right, well, they didn't have potholes. You know, you miss a brick, you pull one out and put a new one in. Next slide, please. This is an upscaled latrine. Cement base, nice aluminum sides, and a top. This is the upscaled version that they were going to get. And so we provided enough money for them to buy at least 13 new ones for the families in the village. What I wanted to know is, what do you do with this latrine now that you've built it and filled it? That is the toilet seat. That is the toilet seat. And what's nice about that toilet seat is you can actually sanitize that toilet seat. Much easier with Clorox. Spritz, spritz, you're done, right? They actually take 5 guys that dig another pit. 5 guys lift this thing and they move it to a new pit. Oh yeah. There's no honeydew man to come along and pump this. You're out in the middle of nowhere, no pumping. Okay, so, you know, when you go home and you look at your toilet tonight, you're going to have a different view of, well, I'm really lucky because I've got flow. There's no leach lines out here too, because leach lines are way, way too expensive, way too expensive. And coupled with that, this ground right here was a bimodally distributed clay cobble. So there's a river nearby, and this was clay. I mean, black, beautiful, fertile clay with cobbles and chunks of basalt. And it was brutal to dig in because we dug a cistern. We helped dig a cistern. I can't say I actually dug the whole thing. I dug a little corner. Next slide, please. So this is our little funny moment. I'm going to try to speed this up here. You can't see it, but there are 1,000 eyes looking at you when you go out to the latrine at night. 1,000 eyes. When you have your headlight on the ground, there's 1,000 spiders on the ground as you run to the latrine. It was really quite incredible to see. Just teeny little spiders. Oh, yeah, well, that's true. I never saw a cockroach there, but teeny little spiders everywhere. Next slide. So this was the wife of the head of the village. Note what she's cooking on. This is a clay oven, wood-fired, and a clay stove, and that's what she's cooking on. And she cooked all week for us on this. Next slide, please. This is where, that's okay. This is where we ate, in their main room at their house. And we had to have disrupted their whole front of their week while we were there, but they were kind and gracious. And this village and the other villages that we met, what held them together, the glue, the fiber, everything that held them together was God. By far, that was the one thing that made their community and kept them together, and that was their one focus. And that's what allowed them to function in this community and have hope. And I learned that from every one of them as I worked with every one of them and got to know every one of them with my pathetic Spanish. But at least I got, I think I got enough, and I think they understood enough of what I had to say that we really shared a really lovely time here. Next slide. So motorcycles, no car, no trucks, nothing for the village. So to me, that was one of the largest barrier for them to get what they grow out to somewhere where they could actually sell at a farmer's market in town. They had motorcycles, and I had suggested to them that they might consider getting, you know, we all know you can get a trailer for the back of your motorcycle. So they're looking into some of the lower cost trailers to see if they can use that. But a couple people in town did actually, in the village, did have motorcycles so they could get around. And they did have oxen, a few goats, and horses, because horses were the other thing that got them around in the town. Next slide, please. Another bathroom. And this is production. So within the couple of years since the Eventide and Disaster Response Ministries had been here, these guys had gotten their orchards started. Next slide, please. And they were selling guavas in town. The guavas were covered to keep them from getting sunburnt. Next slide, please. So they had a beautiful guava orchard. They also had drip lines out there. I think they were pumping for the river and a well here. Next slide. And also they had squash they were growing in this field. Next slide. And they also had mangoes, pawpaws or papayas, watermelons, and in a couple of other villages, you'll see they were also growing pineapples, tomatoes, cucumbers, and a whole bunch of other things. And this was in large part because they had the expertise from SAPOD and the seed money from both SAPOD and the church to be able to do this, and the consultants to come out there and help them get started with their irrigation and the planting of the seeds and the trees. Next slide. I think that was the pawpaw, or I think that was papaya. But correct me if I'm wrong. I was like blowing through. This is a cistern. So you see all the rocks behind that? solid clay, lots of rocks. Next slide. So cisterns used for irrigation in the front yard. They normally dig them out 12 feet long, 3 feet wide, about 1.5 feet deep. And that's enough to get their front yards watered and maybe provide some water for animals. Next slide, please. And right around there was citrus. So they had citrus trees in there. That's okay. A couple of schools, and you can just flip through, you know, a couple of slides at a time here. These are pictures of the schools. That was some crushing of rocks. Another area would bring rocks down from a mine. They would roll this. They had a motor running, electric motor out there running with these huge boulders, crushing the rock with water flowing through it. When it was finally crushed and went off into this pit, then they let it dry and they put it in a bag and hauled it off to another place to get it processed, which was really interesting. More students that we were helping and brought school supplies and sporting goods too. They were just adorable. Next slide. And this is their school supplies. So we brought some very needed school supplies and filled those shelves up with brand new. One whole schoolhouse. That was it. There were 2 of them. I have to put in my oriole and a few other birds because I was birding. And our lizard that was there that was like 14 inches long. He was big. Next slide. You know, a little guinea. Yes, a little fat guinea out there. Next slide. And these guys, parrots. I'm pretty sure it's a parrot, not a parakeet. This guy was pretty big. I haven't keyed out all my birds yet. Next slide. So, maracas. This was such an interesting thing. They're this big and they're stuck right to the side of the tree. And there's only a little teeny petiole like this. You know, when you pull an apricot off or, you know, citrus or whatever, you got a lot more going there. This was right smack against it. Used also for food for the cattle, but they are also for maracas. So when they dry, they get really hard. The seeds dry up inside. You shake them, it's just like a real maraca. Next slide. More latrines. This is a river nearby the village. Brought some Nerf squirt guns, and they went crazy. Next slide. Piñata party. This is like to close out our time with the village. 4 piñatas, a lot of candy, and it's a sport. It's a cutthroat sport, just so you know. And you have to dance to get it lowered. So the better you dance, the lower that piñata goes. Next slide, please. And when they were so pick and cute. Next slide, please. And when it's all, the candy's all on the ground. Yeah, you'll have to hit again. This is it. Everybody that was there hit the floor to get up candy. It was really fun to see. Next slide. It was a real treat. Couple more. Next slide. So this, my friend Lisa does dresses for Dress a Girl around the world, and she sent me down with 12. And I was able to give the villagers 12 new dresses for the girls that were, and she just does amazing work, and little purses that went with them and matched the whole outfit. She's so cute. She was a sweetie. Next picture. All right, on the road again. So we left that village. We're out on the road. Another smoking volcano as we're on the road. And more of our transportation that we saw along the way. And we're on our way to Leon. Before we get to Leon, we hit, you can just scroll through them. We were hitting these villages that were also part of SAPOD, and they had been in the program 2 years, and within 2 years they had full production, that's tilapia, in a cistern. Somebody pulled one out of the river, decided to put them in the cisterns to grow, and takes care of the insects, and also later it's a little snack. Citrus trees, pineapple, guava, and numerous other things. And we'll get to a slide here in a second that shows that's actually pineapple. This is the abundance from 2-year program, from virtually nothing to full production. And that's how fast things grow there too. And things grow fast, and things grow so that you can get it onto the market and into the village's hands too for daily food. What we had talked to them about was also preservation. So you get what do you do about, you have a flood, something wipes out your crop? Do you have any way of preserving this? You know, we would can, we would dry, things like that. So it's another suggestion that they're going to be looking at is how can they do half year, full year storage so that in case an emergency happens again, when they have a volcano, they have a tornado, they have a hurricane, that they actually have food supplies. Next slide. Mud pools, hot, hot, hot. That lady was pulling out mud and putting it in a bag and selling it as a facial scrub. Right out of the hot, bubbling mud pools. Next slide. And next slide. Yeah, that's the video. Leon. So Leon was where the SAPOD school is. And during the pandemic, this is our hotel, our first hotel there. During the pandemic, they only had a few students living there and staying and paying. And even Tide and Disaster Response Ministries helped keep the staff there and the insurance there so that they wouldn't lose their building and the ability to repopulate when COVID was gone. So when we got here, everybody, 3 days, no showers, time to get a shower. First thing, somebody screams. Next slide. This is what they got. This is what they got in their shower. It's about this big. Got in the shower, turned the water on, looked down, and that's what the company was. So the pastor moved it along outside. So it's just, one of the friends that you get to see there. So this Wednesday night, first night in Leon, now we get to the fun. Wednesday night is ham night for the club. So I got back, they're 2 hours ahead. I got back, I went up to my room. I'm like, sorry, gotta go. It's ham night. And I went upstairs, turned on my laptop. It was a laptop that was refurbed that I got ready for somebody else. And I left it there with one of the employees from SAPOD. And I was able to use my Echo, and I started with Echo Link on my phone, and I connected to Elk Grove, and I connected to River City. And then I had a little gap time because I couldn't do the 10 meter. Well, I could have done the SDR, but I decided to use my repeater phone app, and I connected to the node that's called Wales, but it's really not Wales. And, or maybe some part of it is, but the club that I was speaking to wasn't Wales. And I was able to check in on repeater phone. So I went from Echolink down to repeater phone, and this is all done on my iPhone. And then I connected my laptop to my phone, hotspotted it, opened up Web SDR, and then I did River City on the YouTube Live and was able to do my chat. And one of the nice things about Leon is I had really good reception for my phone. I wouldn't have been able to do this in the village. The village reception was sketchy, but you're out in the middle of nowhere. But there is one thing, if you look at CREN, which is one of the main clubs in Nicaragua, CREN, part of their goal is 2 meter basically across the nation. It's to be able to have disaster and emergency ham service on 2 meter bands, 2 meter and 70 centimeter bands. Because it's not a case of is it going to happen, it's just a case of when, especially with volcanic activity down there. They were part of the Pacific Rim of Fire, 6 active volcanoes, but I'm sure there's more when you think about it, and you'll see that in one of my last slides. So I stayed up until 1 there, and I was able to connect to everybody that I wanted to connect to, and that was seamless. But what got me here, and after our volcano boarding here, I'll explain that in like 10 minutes. What got me here was a lot of effort, and I'm still working on it, including with ARRL, to figure out what would have been, what I could have done better to actually use real gear down there or actually make real connections with Nicaraguans in country. Question? And I actually called the FCC first before I went down there because I knew I wasn't going to take my gear. And I said, I'm going to be on my phone. Is it okay to talk to my in-country here, not there, clubs while I'm there using these apps? And they said, at first the lady on the phone was like, I don't know. I said, no, probably not. I said, could you confirm that? So in my last remarks that I have, I'll explain the nuance of the response. But the nuance was, you can talk to your clubs in the United States on your phone using those apps. And there's nuance there. Didn't say anything about Nicaraguan ham radio stations, but it did say that. Your question?
Yes, you sort of answered it. So in other words, your American license is not reciprocal in Nicaragua.
No, that's not true.
Okay,
My
now
yeah.
let me give you a follow-up. Okay.
Okay.
Now, is it similar to Mexico where they say, oh, but you can get a permit, but they don't issue any permits, so in fact, you can never use it anyway?
Not quite. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So they do have reciprocity, and that's on ARRL's website. But before I went, did I find out any additional information that would have helped me bring gear and connect with people there? No, and I contacted CREN, I contacted ARRL because their website takes you to, for Nicaragua, there's a link, and that link takes you to Colombia. Not Nicaragua, but Colombia. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is some kind of centralized area and licensing thing. And for them, you got to go in person, you got to fill out a form, you got to pay 1 day's wage, fair wage, whatever that is. And then, a few crosses and you're good to go, right? So that didn't sound right to me. And so I sent a note over to ARL, and they're like, the people that used to do this, they're gone. The guy that I spoke to, he's new. That didn't seem right to him. He sent a note to CREN, and we're kind of in, well, we're not kind of in limbo. I'll get to that in a minute because it was complicated, but there is a way to have your gear there or use somebody else's gear with your license while you're in country. But you have to plan in advance. And this whole slideshow, beyond having it be a lovely experience in terms of mission, etc., is about planning ahead. And sometimes you have to plan 6 months or more in advance to find out those little bits of minutia that will allow you to communicate in another country or on a ship out at sea also, because I thought about that as well. Next slide. So I had a great evening, and then I had projects to work on, so I didn't go to bed late. I got up early at 5:30. But, Echolink, I'm sure you guys have tried it on your phone. I actually love it on iPhone. And whoever was on that night, it was James. Was Wilson on too? Yeah, I think you all were. Your advice of wait count. After you press that lovely little transmit button, if you wait a second or two and then start talking, there's no lag, and you guys can hear me clearly. And that was the big difference. Plus having 4 bars, that made a big difference to you. Next slide. So this is the this is repeater phone. So if you haven't used repeater phone, it's a lot of fun. Well, for me, it's a lot of fun. A lot of stations. It's similar to Echolink and not. And so I made a couple of connections because I was waiting for slow scan TV, and then on to the next. And this is actually a picture of that moment and who some of the people that were on that particular node. Next slide, please. And then slow scan TV. Here's, checked in. Here are the people that were on that night, our live chat. And next slide, because of course, you gotta have evidence that you did it. And this was some of the stuff that was up that night. Next slide, please. So standard fare, beans and rice, almost the whole trip. That's standard fare, along with a little piece of some fried cheese. This time it was also fried plantain and some eggs and fruit. This was a huge breakfast. Next slide. And we did a journal every day. So you had to do a journal every day one person got the journal and had to write about everything. So I tried to make mine the best comedy ever. We went to the school and you can start scrolling. The people at the school, they gave us a show. It was delightful. They were the cutest kids ever. They ranged from small kids up through late high school. Here we are fixing computers and getting ready, painting the auditorium, which was a huge auditorium. And the great story about that was the English teacher comes down and says, hey, I need the students to learn the better English and I need them to practice. Can they come down and paint and practice with you? That huge auditorium got painted completely that day because it was a win-win. Here's some of the other students, and Eric, who's a youth minister up in, I think, Loomis or Rockland, he was helping out. Main Cathedral in Leon, and this was amazingly a beautiful structure. You can scroll. We got to see the inside, but more importantly, we had to go onto the top of this, and the views were stunning. The reflection off of this white roof was really hard to take with the glasses, but you got to have the $1 million view from the top, and they let you go up there and walk around. And then a couple more volcanoes just poking up out of the hills, mangroves. So our reward was at the end of that and painting and working on the computers, we got a boat ride through the mangroves. And for me, that was great. They have a turtle sanctuary out there. They've got amazing number of birds. And so we got a break to run through the mangroves. You can keep going. And a couple of the different birds that we got to see. That's a variety of kingbird. That is a kingfisher, tropical kingfisher. This is a scissortail. I wish my photos were better. Frigate. And the most, it is a blue heron, but not a great blue heron. This is a boat-billed heron. Now that guy's this high. He's got a beak this big, and that beak is for crushing crab. I mean, you would want him as your dinner mate, right? Because if you don't have a cracker, he's right there to crack those. They snooze during the daytime. So we were able to see quite a few of them in the trees. Next slide. Little alligators in the mangroves, about this big. Quite a few of them. It was that time of the year, I guess. And there was a turtle sanctuary. They were harvesting the eggs from this mom laying the eggs, and they took them over to the nursery. And depending on the temperature of where you put them, hotter was, I think, women and men. So the girls and boys, depending on the sand temp, is what was going to be the sex of the turtles. Next slide, please. And we also got to see the turtles released. A group of them got to be released into the ocean. There were just, a couple hundred buckets of turtles getting picked up by the ocean. And here's this turtle sanctuary there. It was really pretty. It was a really nice beach, but with a pretty rough sea there, or current at the beach edge. And then it's time to come back and head back to the hotel room for volcano boarding. Okay, didn't know about this prior. This is Cerro Negro. This is the traffic jam, because on the way there were a lot of oxens carrying wood for fire and taken to market. And there were also sesame seed fields and sugar cane and a few other things out there on the way to the volcano. Next slide. That's what we slid down, and we had to get up to the top. So some guys took the boards for us, and we had a great guide who explained all the volcanoes and everything that was going on in the background. Here's your toboggan. But you're not going dressed like that. One plant, that was it. That was all that was on this. This was a dual volcano. The older one is on the kind of the left-hand side, and the new one came up in the 70s in the middle of the older one. So next slide. It's just stunning views. I mean, again, another day we had the most amazing views. And only 4 of us went up there to do this. Next slide. So at the top, I'm standing here, the guide, Max, he scrapes the ground back and says, touch that. And I'm like, ooh, that's mighty hot. You could have baked a pig on the top of this by just scraping the ground back a little bit, wrapping it in foil and putting it in the ground. It was that hot up there. And you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it because you're not feeling it emanating from the ground. But if you just scraped a little bit back, that ground was hot to touch. quite amazing. And of course, that tells you active volcano. This was our outfits for the ride down to keep the grind out. And this was Eric screaming to the bottom, which was a lot of fun. And so then we had a wedding. That was Jorge and Marjorie. Weddings in Nicaragua are not done by the church. They are done by the lawyers, which I think is a smart move. So the lawyers did the wedding. They did all the paperwork. You signed their contract. You're married now. And that was it. Next slide. And I've never seen it done that way. They had some family there. We managed to find a cake in town in time. And then we were on the road again and on our way home. So things you learn about on the way out. If you want to lay over, don't lay over in the foreign country, lay over in the US or Mexico or something like that, because El Salvador doesn't like the fact that Nicaragua is making the money off of the duty-free. So if you bring your duty-free booze into El Salvador as your layover, it will get removed from you before you can board the plane. So I heard that beforehand. I'm like, okay, not buying. I would hate that to happen. And we literally got off the plane and walked like 10 feet to our next gate and got searched again, all of our stuff that was hand carried. And people in front of me are losing booze and water bottles and everything else that they just bought. And so that was a lesson learned there, but I did buy my booze there before I left. And then it was really nice that I got picked up by my partner at the end. That was the trip. Now let's get to the next part of his question, squirrels. So I'm going to switch here.
Any questions while we're moving computers?
So I've got 3 pages of notes. No, I've got 5 pages of notes. This is what it took to find out how I could connect to other ham radio enthusiasts while I was in Nicaragua. I started with, and thanks to Carol and JoJo for also pitching in on this, I started with going to the ARL website. You know, that should be your go-to for looking to see what the requirements are, at least to start. When you go to that and you check out, and this first link up here takes you to Colorado for Nicaragua. I mean, not Colorado, Colombia. And as I explained, a bunch of stuff that you would have to do. And I'm like, this link has got to be off. So then I went to the other link that they provided, which was the Facebook page for CREN, Club de Radio Experimentadores de Nicaragua. And their website has a contact, ends up being a gentleman named Juan, who did respond later to my questions. As you scroll down, it took a little while to get some information from him because I had to translate into Spanish what I wanted to ask him, which was who's in charge and how do you get to connect in Nicaragua? And he said, as long as you give us the dates when you're there, then, and you can see that further down, you can contact us and you can use the following stations, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, okay, but you're not the government. And really, when you're going to a foreign country, you want to make sure that you're following what the government guidelines are. So I also did my thing with asking the FCC about whether you can make a connection, and this was their response, which I'm keeping for posterity. And so with the knowledge that the link that ARRL had given me was not correct, and I was unsuccessful before leaving finding the real details, I did not take any equipment. But from going to this website up here, which is the CREN's actual website, I learned that they are sort of like the ARRL kind of for Nicaragua. They teach classes, they're in-person classes, so you have to have X number of hours in person on different parts of your radio programming and how to use antennas and what the rules are and all that. And then you can get, I think it's called an initial first and then a novice or something like that after. And Telcor, the national telecommunications entity, is the one that actually oversees the details. But I couldn't find there. I found the law because I went to this website. I found the law, and it was clear about what the levels are, what you have to do, and then if you're a foreigner, and I cut out, and on this it shows the foreigner section, what you can do as a foreigner, and basically it's fill out a little application. You don't have to pay anything. Let us know when you're going to be there, and you can work within our guidelines for those days that you're there in Nicaragua. But I still haven't found the application. If you scroll further, so Juan was the, it's called a senior, I think it is, something like that for them. So I backed up my information with going to Telcor and going to CREN again and asking more questions. And Telcor hasn't responded yet, but at least I have the national law on paper. I provided this to ARL, actually this. And then another traveler to Nicaragua gave me the opportunity to look at what they had. They had the same problem I did. What can I bring into the country? You know, can I bring a battery? Can I bring a Baofeng? Can I bring something else? He said he gave up and he went to FedEx's prohibited items for Nicaragua that they can't take in. And so if you scroll down, communications equipment, and further phones and modems, and further radio equipment, radios, parts thereof, telecommunications equipment, that kind of told me that I probably shouldn't be bringing any of my gear if I wanted to go home with it. And there's Telcor's information. There's the law. If you scroll down, here's the section on foreigners. The application for the authorization to be able to operate within the Republic of Nicaragua must be processed sufficiently in advance for the date of entry. But the problem is you can't find the application. So today, that's where I am right now, is I'm still working on this because I figure ARL will want to have to update their website and take that connection to Colombia off and to put the right connection in when we can find it. And this was just my list of making connections and some of the additional apps that I've been using, Black Cat, SSTV app, and a few other things. But that was, it was a monumental effort for something that I thought should have been easy, but it's not easy to travel. So the next place I go, and I don't know where that's going to be out of country, but the next place I go, I'm going to research it 6 months in advance so that I can be sure that I can either find somebody in the country and use their equipment, or be able to bring my own equipment so that I can try again, whether it's a tuna can and a little wire and a 9-volt battery somewhere, or something a little more substantial. But I had a great time with the tools that I was given and recommended through our club members. Otherwise, I would not have had this opportunity to be able to connect to the club. And that really made, it was like a little voice from home. I'm like, it was really a great evening for me. It was well worth staying up until 1 a.m. to be able to connect. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Do you have any questions? And I'm sorry it took so long. But I hope you enjoyed your trip to Nicaragua. That's a good question. I would rather go back where I was doing more labor, because I'm more labor oriented. I would rather have, and this is my suggestion to the people that I went with. Oops, center. Is that better? Am I close? Good enough? There I am. All right. So I think I would rather do, if I was to go again anywhere, whether it's mission trip or not, to help somebody in Nicaragua. And I see this as, that trip is helping people stay in country. You know, if you, the politics have got to change there for people to want to stay, and the poverty has got to change, and SEPAD and the churches that are involved are helping do that. They're giving them their independence in their regions to be able to be self-sufficient. If they can find ways to love their country enough to be able to stay there and to have the food security, the housing security, the sanitation to stay there, that's great. And I would love to go and help build things if I was asked. Because I like building things, but I don't want to infringe upon people's normal daily habits of whatever's keeping them going. You know, I don't want to be an invasive species in their presence. If they needed that help, if somebody coming down there to help them build something, sure. I'm much more a hands-on person. This was not enough hands-on for me. If I could have been a part of arranging for a truck to be there or trucks to be there, have the holes dug, have the concrete poured, and us build those latrines while they were doing their thing, and that was okay with them, that would have been much better for me, for my time, to be able to put that stuff together. So they didn't have to have, find somebody to go to town to buy those latrines and bring them back for them. We could have arranged that, perhaps. I don't know how easy that would have been. Again, for, you know, a lot of NGOs have been kicked out of Nicaragua in the last couple of years. So again, that's another one of those political and tenuous things about how much can you step into a country, even when asked to help, and how can you get around some of those barriers. But if we had gotten a truck to bring the supplies and the bikes, somebody else could have negotiated it, the bikes, and buying them, we could have paid for them, and then we could have assembled in the village. That would have been, for me, much more rewarding. And the language barrier was an issue with me and the computers. I had asked prior and got some information prior, but when I got there, that was not necessarily what they wanted. I spent a lot of time pre-configuring them, and it was actually not exactly what they wanted. So having better communication and having more hands-on would be much better for me personally. I know the people that are on the trip, they've gone on these trips before and they will go again. They love the people down there and they were gracious and they were lovely, and my trip companions were delightful. And everybody's older except for Emma. Everybody's older, so you know, digging trenches and assembling things may not be our best thing, but we could certainly go a little further if we could, politics permitting, to get gear there and be able to do the assembly ourselves and not take away from their daily lives, if that was okay with them. You know, interference and intrusion is a big part of my hesitation with going in places like this. Any other questions? I know, it's like, yeah, anybody on Zoom want to ask a question? Are you still there out there? Are you still Zooming? Yeah, unmute people, just ask away. They have another, Disaster Response Ministries and Eventide, they support another village in Alaska. It's actually one that was kind of disowned by Canada, kind of a strange situation. But there's a village in Alaska that they support as well, a beautiful Presbyterian church there and village that has seen a lot of the village disappear because fishing has gone away and there's not a lot of market and supply for them. So this village might also be another one that kind of disappears at some point in the future because of that. Yeah.
You had cell phone service for most of your trip,
Most of my trip. Mhm.
which means that they have electricity and a way to recharge laptops and cell towers and things like that.
Extremely expensive, but yes.
It's interesting to see that you could bring a cell phone into a foreign country and use it and not bring in an amateur radio gear and use that.
Yep. And I again, I don't know all the politics that go on. Walkie-talkies, I don't know if they were used specifically, or handy-talkies either, for people that were against the current government, and that's why they don't want people bringing them in, because they don't want people that are against the government to be using that and drones and binoculars for surveillance. And that's my thought behind that. This is surveillance tools. I don't know. It was interesting. Now, electricity there is, some of it's geothermal, some of it's wind. They had wind farms. We passed some very large wind farms. And what was the other thing? I think there's oil, but they're not getting it from there. Everybody that I spoke to, electricity was very expensive there. And the village, there was a couple laptops, because we actually delivered a couple laptops, refurbished laptops to the village. But they said unequivocally that it was very expensive. And I'm like, well, you got a river here and it flows year round. You could be putting Pelton wheels, Pelton wheels work quite well for supplying small amounts of electricity. And if you're using that for pumps for water to go to people's houses or water for irrigation, why not put some Pelton wheels on that river? And so they were taking that advice under consideration. There was one village that did have a Pelton wheel. So they were talking to the village that we visited to see if that could be of use to them and whether it was economical. Because, if electricity is that expensive, you've got a river right here, a couple Pelton wheels would go a long way to providing electricity, even just for the pumps that they're using for irrigation. And not having to get somebody to drag diesel fuel out there or something like that. It was very, very, very rudimentary electricity. Very.
Do they have solar at all?
They couldn't afford solar in the villages. I did not see any panels anywhere out in Nicaragua, in Leon, San Francisco Libre. I didn't see any there. And I didn't see any in Managua. They may have it, but I suspect that it's, again, too costly for the village. Couldn't afford it. Yeah. It's sad, Yeah. It's sad, but
We are so privileged.
Oh.
We are so nonchalant about
yeah, we are very privileged. But we also have people in our country that are in the same position. And I'm not talking about homeless people, although they are or unhomed people. They have that condition and issue as well. But I'm also talking about lots of areas in the United States that are as poor or economically disadvantaged as the people that we saw in Nicaragua. And we tend to ignore that as well and go to foreign countries to help them there. But it's different. What can I say?
As long as we do the good we can, when we can, where we can.
Small steps and a little bit from everybody in small steps, and you never know, just a smile, just one little nugget to somebody can change their lives. It really can. Yes, Mike.
Know offhand if there were any Echolink nodes in Nicaragua?
There are.
Would it have been okay for you to communicate with your phone with those people?
I didn't, and that was the nuance in that letter, because I told them specifically that I was talking to the clubs here. It was okay. They did not say it's okay to connect to the clubs in Nicaragua, but they do have Echolink nodes, and All-Star. And if I'd had my Baofeng with me, my little 5 or 8 watt, either one of them, I probably would have done pretty well in Leon and Managua. Not so much, I think, in the rural areas, but definitely in the two cities, I probably would have done okay, especially on top of that cathedral. That would. Can I just hide around this corner here, whip out my, stretch out a little tuna can, a little wire out here, a 9-volt battery. Deet, 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 deet. Yeah, it would have been pretty funny. Yeah, probably would have gotten busted for that, but yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to do anything that would require me to be incarcerated.
One.
Did you physically meet any local hams? Did you have a chance?
No. No. But if I were to go back down, I would definitely have my list ready to go. And I've asked Juan and to see if we couldn't schedule a connection, that we could schedule a date and time to see if we could connect on HF. And so I'm waiting for him to hear back from him to see if I can schedule a connection and grab somebody, a friend of mine who speaks Spanish really well. And that way we can see if we can get more connections together with them, which I think would be a lot of fun. I have heard from my station, I have heard Central and South America, but right now the way my antennas are draped across my yard, I'm doing better like north and west, and actually the south. I got to cut a little bubble in the middle of the country, so got to work on that. But I've been doing well to hear the Northeast, Canada, and well, I heard the Marshall Islands one day. I did a POTA connection in Hawaii, and I heard, but it could be because people have got wattage that blows your ears back. But Texas always seems to be really loud. Just like, whoa.
Everything's bigger in Texas.
Yes, I'm like, yes. Yeah, I've had some unusual, like the other night, I was just like, wow, I'm listening to South Africa. And this was just after I connected my new end-fed that was up 60 feet up in my tree. And it's like, I'm listening, and he was crisp. He was really clear. And that was, like, oh, yay. I don't have a map yet where I can put my little pins in. But I thought, yeah, the end-fed's working because I'm hearing. And I don't know how to do it, but which direction did I go? Did I go north or did I go south to connect? That would be the next bit. I bet you Carol could help me on that one. But it's really, higher up makes a difference in downtown Sacramento. So any other questions? No, thank you. Thank you for letting me take you on my trip and share some experiences. And if you have any other questions, feel free to anytime email me, jengarland59@gmail.com. And I look forward to hearing you all on the air and talking about all the things, because I learned so much from talking to folks about what they're using and buying new things and tweaking them and getting rid of things that don't work. It's made such a difference in who I've been able to listen to and connect to. So thank you very much. Thank you for being a welcoming club.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
That was good.
Please eat my cookies. That's not enough. We will take your cookies. Thank you. Thank you. Take the cookies.
Okay. Well, after that wonderful sojourn in Nicaragua, we do have some other club business to entertain you with. And that is entertaining the thoughts of helping out when it comes into field day time. Phil was a big help last year, but he's not going to be in town for this one, and neither will James. So we need some bodies or somebody to be captain and a few bodies to make it go smoothly. And so even if you don't have an answer today, I'd like you to give some real thought to how you can participate in making field day a successful event. Now, in the last couple of years, we've been at the VFW And there were some issues that arose, and so we're having to change venues. We probably will be out at the place in Rio Linda, where we used to have the Farm and Tractor, if you're familiar with that venue, and that sort of thing. We've discussed the idea that we need fans because heat can be a problem. None of us are young enough to take the heat or want to. So that's probably the only solution that we've looked for so far. But any ideas you have that could contribute to making us have a really successful field day would be much appreciated, and especially your time and presence on the day of. So I just would like you to all give a lot of thought to that so that you can be ready when June rolls around and that sort of thing. So does anybody have anything that they would like to ask the club or present the club? I don't see a show of hands, so. Oh, would you, yeah, come talk to them about the, because you are much more informed on that.
On which part of it? I said I volunteered for field day. So
Okay.
if whoever needs, I put it on my calendar to be a volunteer for whoever needs me for whatever.
Okay. I want you to talk about one other thing too.
Yes.
You were talking about needing people to help out with your project.
Yeah. Yeah, let me put my drink down here. So I'll sneak back over in front of the camera again here.
Yeah.
One of the cameras. All right. So the space station. So because you all have got me into slow scan TV and it's interesting, I went out to see what was going on with the space station. And of course, I guess the slow scan TV portion is kind of broken on the Russian side, so we can't do slow scan right now. But that led me to they have applications out for groups to do a connection, 2-meter connection, to talk to an astronaut for 10 minutes as they're flying over. And that's groups like Girl Scouts, high schools, whatever. And so I told my neighbor, I said, hey, the applications that are out, they need to be back by the 31st. There's quite a club list. Sorry, Carol. There's quite a list of parameters for the base station and the backup station. And you've got to have a curriculum and all that. But we whipped an application together. We talked to the board about it, and they approved it to be the sponsors for the Girl Scouts troop that I know, and expanded to 2 high school clubs, McClatchy and another one, and the larger Sacramento area, to be able to, if our application is accepted, to do a connection with the space station, 10 minutes, spring, winter, late winter, early spring next year. And there's quite an equipment list, and we have, if we get accepted, which we'll know in 2 weeks, then we have to get our equipment list in pretty quickly so they can go through and make sure that we're able to make that connection with equipment we have, and or get that equipment so that we can do it. And then we have the option of direct connection, multi-bridge, telebridge. Telebridge or multi-telebridge. And so we were going the route that a telebridge, multi-telebridge would be the best route, with our club and associates doing the connection, the main connection, and then it's shooting out either through Zoom or YouTube Live channel or through the school's system, broadcasting system that they use. So I'm going to be looking for, and others are going to be looking for, assistance with putting that list together if we do get our application accepted. So it'll be a ground station. You've got to have, one of you was talking about antennas earlier on the outside, azimuth and elevation, rotating antenna, so that you can track it, the space station, and keep a good communication as they are passing us by. And there's some other base station issues too. So that we're looking for assistance with that if we're accepted. And like I said, we'll be 2 weeks, I think about.
So by the time we have our next board meeting.
Yeah, by the next time next board meeting, we should know by then.
And that.
Yeah.
Good.
Fun.
I have a comment.
Okay.
That's Steve.
Hey, Steve, comment.
Yeah, I don't know how many of us are amateur astronomers, but I have watched that go over many times. ISS, and typically we can only see it like a maximum of 6 to 7 minutes. So it might be kind of hard to communicate with it for 10 minutes because it goes behind the curvature of the Earth and you lose sight of it. And light and the radio waves pretty much propagate the same way. So just to bring that to our attention, you might have to have 2 stations situated miles apart if you want to have it at up to 10 minutes to keep the connection. Sometimes you can only see it for like 3 minutes or less, depending on the pass. So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, I think they were supposed to schedule the day of connection, and I would suspect that they have some notion on what the optimal trajectory would be for the connection that they're trying to make. You know, whether
Yeah,
it's
they do.
a broad or narrow pass.
Yeah, there's a website. I get emails when it's going to come over and how long it's going to be up, visible, and for how long, at what azimuth, and what declination. So yeah, that information is available readily.
I have a comment. This is Neil. Many years ago, I was part of the team that did the shuttle amateur radio experiment back in Houston. You're absolutely correct. They can be visible between depending on the pass, for 4 minutes up to about 7 minutes. However, the communication is, we're capable to communicate with them in some occasions for up to 10 to 12 minutes beyond the line of sight. So the 10 minutes, they will consider that, and they'll give you very specific times to call and when you can connect. But your observation is very well taken, but you can communicate for longer than they're visible.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Okay. Are we ready to call it a night then, fellas? Okay. Thank you for all being here. There's plenty of cookies and so on still back there. I'm sure Jen would appreciate if you appreciated her offerings. Yeah. Hey, take a little bit of Nicaragua home with you. If you don't want to chomp it, you can share it with a friend.
Thank you all. Our meeting is now concluded. We are supposed to try to get out of here by 9 p.m. So go ahead and get your snacks. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the presentation.
Indeed.
Okay.